We have been looking at the Gospel of Luke, and last week I shared with you a couple of stories that Jesus told in Luke chapter 15. And there's actually 3 stories that Jesus tells there, but we covered 2, the first 2. And we skipped the third story. And we're coming to chapter 16, and we're going to look at what Jesus has to say there, what kind of story he tells. And what's been happening is that through these stories, Jesus has been kind of conveying to those people, the core group of disciples, but also the larger group of people that are following him, about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And what we've seen is a kind of a progression in what he has to say. Each time he'll say something, and next time he kind of builds on it. And whether it's the expectation of the disciples or kind of revealing a character of God, it just kind of builds and builds and builds. And today, we are going to look at chapter 16. And I want to invite you guys to kind of pay special attention, because this is one of those stories, hard to follow, hard to understand, and almost impossible to accept. Yeah, this is a hard one, so here we go. Listen for the word of the Lord. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am dismissed as a manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So summoning his master's debtors, one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust you with true riches? If you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve 2 masters. For a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth.'" The word of the Lord. All right, having read that, what do you guys think? When you read this story, is there something that just doesn't sit well with you about this story? I mean, it's a hard story, right? And when I read this, it's like, what is Jesus actually trying to teach through this story? I asked that question. I'm like, is he telling us it's okay to be dishonest, like this manager? That it's okay to be a cheater or a crook? Right? I don't know. When you read the story, that's what it seems to be implying. And this story, like I said, a very tough story to understand. In fact, this is one of the most difficult stories in the Bible. And I find that to be so. I don't know about you guys, but it's just hard to understand. Let's kind of go over this story, okay? Let's see what's happening here. In the story, there is a dishonest manager who is squandering or wasting the master's wealth. And the master hears about it. And there's a reckoning. The master tells his manager, "Hey, I want an accounting of what you have been doing." And the manager freaks out. He's like, "Oh my gosh, What am I going to do now? He's going to find out that I've been misusing his wealth, and he's going to fire me, if not put me in prison, right? Woo! Then the manager comes up with a plan to use his position as a manager to gain the favor of those people who owe his manager. I got an idea. He calls the master's debtors together, and he tells them, hey, remember that bill I gave you? Everybody, bring your bills. Let me see what you got. And he starts asking people, what do you owe my master? And I'm like, I owe 100 jugs of olive oil. How am I ever going to pay this back? He goes, make it 50. Write it. Change the bill right now. He's like, woohoo! And I can see like kind of almost a party going on. You know, like everybody's been let go of their debt. Right? How much do you owe? 100 bushels of wheat. I don't know if I can pay. Make it 80 right now. And like, oh man, you're the best manager in the whole world. And excitement's exploding, right? In the story, when we hear what's happening, we expect the master to become angry, right? We expect him to be enraged. What is going on here? And in our minds, in my mind at least, that would be the right thing to do for the manager. To be upset, to be enraged. It's what would be expected in our society, wouldn't it? But instead, what we see is the master commends this manager. And with most of us, that doesn't sit well, does it? Go, what's going on here? Why is Jesus complimenting this crooked guy? He's like, oh my gosh, it's like he's already mismanaged it, but now he's even going further and doing more bad stuff. It doesn't sit well with us, and it throws our morals or ethics for a loop. And we don't get it. How can this be? How can the master compliment this guy? Here's what's happening. This story by itself really is hard to understand. It is. And when we look at it, we become confused about Christian ethics or Christian morals, about how we're supposed to live. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't sit right with us. But it's when we look at the story that we skipped last week, the third story, and kind of connect the two, that the story that we read today begins to make more sense. And what we skipped last week, the third story in chapter 15, is a story about a father and his two sons. Are you guys kind of thinking about it? The story of the prodigal son. Most of us know that story, right? For those of you who don't, I'll kind of rehash it, but there it is. Read it quick. I'm just kidding. I just put it up there for you and then highlighted some things that I'm going to touch on. If you can see it, great. If you can't, I'll verbally share it with you. What we see, and those of you who know the story of the prodigal son, I don't know if you've ever noticed this. There is a strong similarity and a parallel between the story of the prodigal son and the story that we read today. Yeah, but once again, it begins to escalate, and that's what we're going to try to catch. Here are some similarities. In the story of the father and the two sons, the prodigal son, there is a father who is wealthy, who owns stuff, just like in the story of the master, right? And in this story, there is a younger son who is given property, just as the manager is given authority over property and responsibility to take care of it. And that's what happens. And the younger son, just as in the story for today, is told that he has squandered and wasted what was given to him. And actually, in both stories, that same word is used, that the younger son and the manager had squandered what was given to them. Do you see that up there? Yellow, kind of? Okay, it's up there. Okay? And he squanders it, and the younger son, just like the manager, at some point, comes to his senses. He's like, oh my gosh, I've wasted everything. I've got nothing to eat. I'm sitting here with animals trying to steal their food. What is happening in my life? And he's like, I know. And the younger son literally says, I know what I will do. Just as the manager has this moment of epiphany. Oh my gosh, I've got to do something. And the younger son says, and once again, just like the manager, comes up with a plan. But it's not like an honest, sincere plan. He begins to calculate things in his head. And the younger son says, I know what I will do. I know my dad. I know what he's a sucker for. I will go up to my dad and I will say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and I have sinned against you and da-da-da-da-da. And he's rehearsing it, right? And he says, this is what I will say. Just as the manager was calculating and saying, I've got a plan. I'm going to execute this plan. In both stories, there is an unexpected twist at the end. When we would expect the father to be like, oh, the son who has just wasted my fortune is coming, he'd be like, right? But instead, we are told that the father runs out and hugs this son. And you go, oh yeah, that's a parent-child thing, give him a hug. No, we have to realize that this younger son has been away in a foreign land, has defiled himself, has been living with pigs, spiritually unclean. The father cannot go near this guy, or else he himself will become spiritually unclean. But the father doesn't care. He runs to him, hugs him, and instead of bopping him one on the head, which I probably would do, he says, bring the best robe, put it on him. Get a ring on his finger. Let people know that he's my son. Put sandals on his feet so people will know that he doesn't work in the fields. Kill the fattest animal. Let's celebrate. Right? And in our minds, we go, okay, I probably would not do that, but some parents who are really nice, I could see that. Okay, it's acceptable. Right? And so we accept the story of the prodigal son. But we get to today's story. The relationship is not about a father and a son. The relationship is about a master and a manager, or an owner and an employee. Now, that changes things, doesn't it? Anybody here a supervisor, business owner? What do you do when one of your employees is stealing, is like taking money from your customers? I see hands going up. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is totally not acceptable, right? So why does Jesus tell this story right after the prodigal son story? I think if we look at these stories as stories not about the son or the crooked manager, right, which we tend to do, and that's why it's not acceptable. But if we were to look at these stories as stories of the father and of the master, the stories begin to make more sense. These stories are about the greatness of God's love and of God's forgiveness. See, the people who have been following Jesus, he can't just dump everything on them at once. He's got to build them up to it. So he tells the story of the prodigal son. This is what the love of the Father is like. This is what the love and the forgiveness of God is like. And then they go, oh, okay, we don't want to accept it because we'd rather hit him on the head, but okay. But now he builds on that and tells this story about a crooked manager. And Jesus says, that is the greatness of God's grace and of God's love. To look at this manager and still be able to smile and go, he's such a cute little guy. I love this little manager. He's trying his best, right? It enrages us. But the point is, that's how great God's forgiveness is. It's crazy. It doesn't make sense. It just takes God's grace and love to a whole nother level of which we cannot understand. And for some of us, it's very difficult to accept. Not only when we see it happening in somebody else's life, but maybe even in our life. So many of us go through life thinking, I can't be forgiven. God's grace is not big enough for me. And Jesus is telling the disciples and all those that follow him, there is nothing that I cannot forgive. There is no person that I cannot love. And no matter what we may be going through, we can be assured that God is smiling upon us, that God is drawing near to us. With the words of the crooked manager, what will I do? Right? He begins to scramble and use whatever means he has so that he can live. Right? And Jesus comments in this story. He steps out of the story and now he's talking to all those people that are following him. And he says, so from this story, Jesus says, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth. And even that doesn't sit with us well. And, I can go into a whole thing about that too. But Jesus is reminding us that making friends is not just about developing a friend relationship like we would know. Hey, John, hey, da, 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 right? That's not what Jesus is talking about. We have to look at the story. It's about a person who is in a higher position. Okay, there's the master, and the manager was a representative of this master. So he was still pretty high. And then there were all these people, probably poorer people, who owed the master, right? So can you imagine a manager, of the master going to these people, hey man, whoa, you owe me some money. What's going on? Right, I'm going to have to raise the interest rate. You're going to have to owe now 120, 150 bushels of wheat, 150 jars of olive oil. That's what you're going to owe me, man. Right? But what is happening in this story, is that this manager who is in a higher position, right, practices forgiveness of debt with those who are less fortunate, with those who are indebted, and pulls them up to the same level, whether it's higher or somewhere in the middle, pulls them up and takes them to the same level that he is at, that they can now be equals, that they can now be friends, that they can now enter into each other's homes. Right? That's why it says, and so that they will be able to invite you into their eternal homes. Right? Pulls them up. And in that sense, I really think that what Jesus is inviting all of us to do is, it's not just about making friends with this guy, that guy, but those people who are in need, are we willing to pull them up that we can become equals, that we can become friends, that we can enter into each other's homes? Dishonest wealth, I don't want to go, like I said, too deeply into that. But it's just a challenge for all of us. Whether you think your talents, your gifts, what you have, your money, your job, your title, whatever it is, whether you have achieved it, honestly, or whether you have practiced a little something in the gray to get a little extra money, Jesus, whatever you've got, use it to lift people up, right? I don't know if you have this year watched the tennis U.S. Open. I haven't watched tennis in a long time. Men's tennis, they're great, but not very entertaining. What I have found entertaining is the women's U.S. Open. Anybody been watching? Did you guys watch the women's U.S. Open? Anybody into tennis? Tennis, it's kind of going down, right? But actually, women's tennis is quite exciting. You guys should start watching it. So last year, what happened was that at the finals, Serena Williams was in the finals with a small Naomi Osaka. Do you guys remember that? Right? She's half black, half Japanese, something like that. And everybody is rooting for Serena Williams because they want to see her break the record of the most majors won. So they're like, yay, whenever she gets up, and they're like, yay, when Naomi Osaka, they're like, boo. And this is U.S. Open is held in Flushing, New York. And New York people, they let you know, right, who they like and who they don't like. And they're booing her, and then there was controversy with the umpire, and it was crazy, but Naomi wins. She upsets Serena Williams, and she wins the U.S. Open. And throughout the year, Naomi Osaka's been playing great. She is now the #1 tennis player in the world, right? She comes to this year's U.S. Open. She gets to the third round, and now she is playing not a veteran, but a newcomer, a rookie, by the name of Coco Gauff, right? She is this 15-year-old phenom. And everybody's hyped. And of course, she's an American, right? So whenever she's playing, they're like, ah! They get to the third round. She's playing Naomi Osaka. And even though Naomi Osaka is the #1 champion in the world, who do you think they're cheering for and who do you think they're booing? Right? But let's see what happens.
Finally tonight, two young tennis greats serving up an incredible moment on the court. Forget the match, it's what happened right after. At the U.S. Open, all eyes were on 15-year-old tennis phenom Coco Gauff.
There's some power from the return of Gauff.
The crowd clearly in Coco's corner, even though her opponent, the defending champion, Naomi Osaka, is #1 in the world. Osaka dominating Gauff in straight sets.
There it is.
But her best play came after the match.
I'm gonna cry.
Osaka encouraging Gauff to join her in the courtside interview, typically reserved for the victors.
I think it's better than going into the shower and crying.
It's not the first time Osaka showed incredible grace. At last year's U.S. Open final, she defeated legendary star Serena Williams in a hotly contested match. Osaka showing humility while supporting Williams.
Congratulations, Naomi. No more booing.
And Osaka showing the world again how it's done.
She told me that I did amazing and good luck. Thank you, Naomi. I don't want people to think that I'm trying to take this moment away from her because she really deserves it, so thank you.
But it doesn't end there. Osaka addressing Coco's parents, telling them they should be proud, and Coco is well on her way.
You guys raised an amazing player. I used to see you guys, I remember I used to see you guys training in the same place as us, and for me, like the fact that both of us made it, and we're both still working as hard as we can, I think it's incredible. And I think you guys are amazing. I think, Coco, you're amazing.
Naomi Osaka, such a class act.
Wow. Okay, just to let you know, a couple days before this match, they were already interviewing Coco. And they're like, okay, you're going to the third round, and you're going to be playing Naomi Osaka. And they're interviewing her. And when they say, you're going to be playing Naomi Osaka, people are like, boo. I saw the interview. They're like, boo, boo, you're right. And she kind of laughs and kind of makes light of it. So when I saw that, I was like, a little bit arrogant for a 15-year-old, right? I'm like, whoa. And then the match comes. Osaka beats her straight sets, 6-3, 6-0, right? Puts this 15-year-old in her place. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there's the winner's interview right after the match. It's for the winner. And I don't know about you guys, but some of us would be like, shh, hey, yeah, I took her down. Straight sets, 6-3, 6-0, bam, game over, mic drop, whatever, right? Osaka has, and it's hers to take. It's her statement to make. All of those things she has done, right? But she has an opportunity there to do that or to reach out to this 15-year-old who is now, her heart's been shattered, crying. Instead of putting her in her place, putting her down, Osaka goes over and lifts her up. Right? Why don't you come and do the interview with me? Right? That will soften and ease your heart. It'll allow you to be a better player, to be able to go on. Because you know what? She's going to lose more matches. How is she going to handle it? And Osaka, right, builds her up, builds her up. I have never, ever seen this in any professional tennis or any sports kind of like arena. And then she looks to Coco's parents. You guys did an amazing job. You raised a great girl, a great player. You should be proud of her, right? Because I got to be honest with you. Do you guys remember another child phenom in golf by the name of Michelle Wee? Do you guys remember that? Does she still play? She still plays? Not very good. But she was a child phenom, right? She is an Asian woman who is about 6'2". I think they record her at like 6 because she doesn't want to seem so big, but she's like 6'2". Because I walked by her. We went to, when we were in Hawaii, there was a tournament and we got to go. And my younger daughter, when she was just little, was waiting by the honey bucket to get her autograph as she comes out. You know, as soon as she came out, my younger daughter was like, "Can I have your autograph?" I'm like, "Ooh, touch that pen." Yeah. Right, get her autograph. But she was huge. And here's the thing. With Michelle Wee, her parents were there, her mom and dad, and they're following her, and we were following her too. And man, it was terrible. I saw her parents like, "Oh my gosh," you know, they're speaking in Korean. They're like, "Oh my gosh, oh, that's a terrible shot. Oh my gosh, what's she doing?" And I'm like, man, just watching from the side, I'm like, that's terrible. And I don't know what was going to happen with Coco and her parents. But for Osaka, right at the end of that devastating loss, to turn to Coco's parents and say, "Hey, she's a great player. You guys did an amazing job," right? She just lifts Coco up. She lifts up Coco's parents so that they can be better people, so that maybe they can pass that on to others. See, all of us sitting here, we may not have that same platform that Naomi Osaka has, but all of us will be given opportunities in our life, and we will be given the choice of whether we will put somebody in their place or we will choose to lift them up. And what I hear Jesus letting us know is, no matter what you have in your life, whether it's your title, whether you gained it honestly or dishonestly, money, whatever titles, what social status, whatever you have, use it to lift people up. Make them your brothers, your sisters, your friends, that we can look to each other as equals, right? And in that way, we can all glorify God together as brothers and sisters. Isn't that right? Amen.